Welcome to Take Brainstalk with your girl Flavilla Phone Gang, and today I'm going to fuel your brain with some bomb knowledge. Are you ready? Let's do it. Hello everybody. Welcome back for another episode of Tech Brainstalk. I am so excited. I'm always super excited to do this podcast to have all my guests with me, because today actually it's very different from all the other episodes that I've recorded, because usually I have conversation with people in the world of technology, but this time I actually invited somebody from my own world, the world of creatives, and how to be great at selling your creative services. And you probably don't know him, but he's the equivalent of Michael Jackson in the world of industry. So let me introduce you to Blair Enns in a few words. So he's the author of the book, The Win Without Pitching, Manifesto, and also Pricing Creativity, a guide to profit beyond the billable hour. And he also has a podcast like me, which is probably has much more listeners than I have, but don't worry, I'm getting there. Two Bobs that he co-hosts with David C. Becker. If you haven't listened to this podcast, I really recommend it. It's a good laugh. And that's actually, I try to remember how I actually came across that podcast, but I think this podcast really changed my agency and the way I sell. You know what's funny as well, before I get started, I like to share personal stories because it's actually quite funny. I've been listening to Two Bobs every morning when I get ready to go to work. So I've joined a collective of agency owners where we have conversation and say, well, fantastic. This time we're going to have Blair Enns going to come and do a presentation. So I was like, okay, great. I have to be there. And I was probably one of the first person to come to the stage. And I would say, hey, Blair. And being like, who is this girl? She obviously knows me. Maybe I know her too. And literally took me into your arms like a stranger meets another stranger, or maybe two friends that already know each other, which is a story that I like to share with my listeners. And obviously remind you, Blair, how we met. How are you?
I'm very good, Flavilla. Thank you. It's really nice to be here. We've been talking about this for a while. And I love that story of how we met, like we'd known each other forever.
Absolutely. And I think that's the beauty. I think I get this as well, because I think as you become a public face, people think they know you, isn't it? This element of, oh, I know that person, but they don't realize that you have no idea who they are.
And it's the podcast that is the most intimate medium. As you've mentioned, I've written 2 books. And so I have some awareness in my target market for those books, but it's really the listening to my voice through my podcast, Two Bobs, that people really feel a more personal connection. So and that's something that surprised me about the medium. But, if your listeners are thinking about how to generate leads for their business, obviously this is the era of podcasting, and there is something really compelling about the medium.
100%. And that's obviously why I also started my own podcast, listening to yours. And the reason why I brought you to this podcast, obviously you're not from the world of technology. You help companies like mine, agencies who are trying to scale and trying to really move away from giving away too much of their creativity for free. And it's funny because I was saying to you last time that people know me as I'm a princess. I have my standards, and I don't like to work for free. So if you choose to work with me, by that point, you've already made a decision. And I think that attitude really helped me in people choosing to work with the Flavilla brand and also the Three Colors World agency. But when we think about selling, it's a numbers game, right?
Well, it depends on what you're selling. See, in the scaled world of technology products, like SaaS or productized services, it absolutely is a numbers game. In my world, which is advising independent creative firms, it's not really a numbers game. In fact, that's a misconception that I spend a lot of time fighting. So in a typical marketing firm, and this is tricky. So I make the distinction again between customized and productized services. One is pursuing scale, and the other one is pursuing a small stable of clients for whom they do bespoke engagements. And in that world, sometimes those firm owners make the mistake of pursuing scale without considering the trade-offs that they make. But in that world, it's not really a numbers game, because you really only need no more than one new client per quarter. So of course there's some numbers, but like in a tech world or a productized services world, you can do some fairly accurate math around the number of leads, which leads to the number of conversations, and a closing rate, which leads to a number of sales. And and you can assign monetary value to that. So you can do these weighted forecasts that predict the future. And then the goal is simply to pour more volume into the top of the funnel. So in some businesses, it is a numbers game. And in other businesses, it's really more, the numbers are a lot smaller, so small that it doesn't even make sense to do a weighted sales forecast, because you're really having a smaller number of conversations. You're a lot more discerning in those conversations about whether or not this is a good fit. So yeah, it really depends on what business you're in.
Yeah, I like that you said that, because I think you're right. I love the idea of falling in love with my customers. I want to make sure that I have a long-term relationship and they stay with me for a long time. And I think people quite often, when they look at selling, is that what's next? Who's the next person I need to get, in terms of how much can I help them with their vision, and they will still buy from me, instead of, oh, I'm going to keep them for one or couple of services and I know they're going to leave at some point, instead of maintaining that relationship as much as you can. And I see where you're coming from. But again, as you say, it doesn't apply to all industry. So my next question is very much around the evolution of a salesman, because probably before our days, but people used to pick up a phone and pick up a book and call a random number and hope for the best. But now we're in a situation with digitalization. People expect much more from us. We need to know the name of their pet, the color of their car. If you don't know, you get offended. But at the same time, if you know too much, you're intrusive. What's the fine line? What do you think is the fine line?
Privacy. Yeah. I think as we wait for kind of, the saying software eats the world, as we wait for data, big data and AI to eat the world, I think we're overstating the amount of information that's expected, that a salesperson is expected to have about a prospect. I think we need to look at it the other way around. What internet search, not so much big data, but just the proliferation of data itself, that knowledge is out there. What that is driving is a more informed customer rather than a more informed salesperson. So what we're seeing is, before an interaction with the salesperson, the customer already has a lot more information about our product. And that's the big shift that the authors of the Challenger sale wrote about. And I think there's a statistic that they bandy about that says, now, and I don't know what the most recent number is, but it's somewhere around 58%, which is at the time of the first interaction between a buyer and a salesperson, that buyer has navigated through 58%, getting close to 2/3 of the sales cycle of the purchase cycle before they even talk to a salesperson. Now, it used to be that the buyers would look to salespeople to inform them about the company's products, services, also what's going on in the marketplace. But because of internet search, that's not the case anymore. So I think the big fundamental shift when it comes to knowledge and data is not so much this expectation of the buyer expects the salesperson to be informed, but that we, the salespeople, we need to understand that the buyer already has more information about us. And that information might be right, or it might just be, it might be an inaccurate, to our mind, inaccurate perception of our product or service based on what they're learning out there on the internet. So I think that's the fundamental shift. I think this idea that we're supposed to have a lot more knowledge about the buyer, I think that is overstated.
Well, I'm going to challenge you here, Blair, because in the world of technology, it's very different, because I don't know if you heard about linguistic analytics, but for example, one of my guests talk about, if you're selling makeup to two different generations, you may use the word put makeup for one generation and apply makeup for another generation. So when you are in the world of technology, they are offering services that people are not even aware exist. So again, that's my challenge. What do you believe they should do about it?
No, I think you're right. I hadn't considered it that way. So here's another example of, I'm thinking of one world and you're dragging me back to this other world. So in this other world of products or productized services, you have to do these sophisticated segmentation analyses around, these different buyer types, buyer personas. And you do have to craft your language to meet them. So I'm thinking in my world of more customized services, I don't see that as being nearly as relevant. But you're absolutely right. And then the bigger your market, and then the larger the volume, then the more it's incumbent on you to do these analyses. And I hadn't thought about linguistic analysis. That's a new one to me. But as you explain it, it makes perfect sense. The bigger your segment, the more the money's at stake, the more it makes sense for you to invest in understanding those segments, is identifying them as clearly as you can, and identifying them as well as you can, and then putting the right offer in front of them at the right price, using the right language. All of that makes perfect sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think also the dangers around the world that we live in. And I think a lot of obviously people consume a lot of information through the digital space, social media, and we are less objective and more subjective to decisions. And obviously, trying to think in terms of how does it apply in the world of selling, but also, as you mentioned, the fact that people expect much more from us. So there's much more value we need to provide before we're even ready to make an offer. Do you think that what's the exact amount of valuable information should technology companies or maybe just people in the world of creative need to provide without actually losing their sense of what they're offering?
I'm not sure what the answer is to that question, but when I think of there's some easy wins for improving the use of technology and to create better relationships with our clients. And the one that comes to mind is just retargeting. So the synchronization of, and again, it gets into this gray area of too much information can be seen as privacy invasion. But if I visit your website, you're selling a product, and then you retarget me and via ads, and I click on one of those ads, I buy the product. You've successfully converted me. Sometimes we think, we see the retargeting. We think, okay, that's smart. Maybe a few years ago when we hadn't noticed this before, we thought, oh, that's really smart. Then we realize, okay, it's just a simple piece of technology. And at some point we buy, and we keep seeing those retargeted ads. That conversion doesn't show up. Or, the in-store, like connecting the in-store purchase if there is a brick and mortar store. Remember when we used to go to stores?
So long ago.
Connecting that in-store purchase to kind of the retargeting efforts. I think I don't know how difficult that is to do technically, but there's some, as the technology gets more advanced, our expectations as buyers comes along. Like we get frustrated. You should know this about me. I saw somebody put an ad in front of me the other day that assumed that I was in Persia, I think. Do you want me to translate this to Farsi? And you think, well, come on, that's an easy one. You should know where I am, even though I use a VPN sometimes to try to disguise where I am. We have these expectations. So, I mean, it's difficult. We've got to, technology marketers have to walk this line. I'm not telling you or your audience anything you don't know. So just stop me.
Are you a secret agent, Blair, that we don't know about? You trying to hide your location? I love that. When I think about again, talking about from the world of B2B, so not selling B2C, but selling B2B services like we do. And, again, the idea of automation and having a real conversation with an individual. What's a fine line in terms of using technology and a couple of emails that you send on a regular, on automation, and then bots as well? And actually, when is the time to actually say, I'm going to pick up the phone and speak to that person?
Yeah, it's a great question. I don't know the exact answer to it, but this is a real important issue. Again, especially when it comes to customized services where sales isn't really the numbers game that it is in products or productized services. I think one of the big misses in this world when it comes to marketing automation is I think there's a tendency to fall in love with the tools and we over automate things in that type of B2B sales world of customized services, because I think a lot of these automations should be a trigger to the salesperson to actually reach out rather than send the automated email. And there's always a time and a place for the automated email, and you can take people so far down the funnel, but at certain lead score velocity, change in velocity, the trigger should be to prompt the salesperson to actually reach out rather than reaching out on behalf of the salesperson. And I can't articulate where that should be. We all know when we're trapped, and maybe trapped isn't the right word, but we are in somebody's marketing funnel.
Yeah.
And when it's done really well, we know it's a bot, right? We know that email was not handcrafted by an individual, and we're okay with it. And even in those scenarios, it's like, okay, that's one email too many. And then when we get something that clearly is, or that really, really seems to be handcrafted by an individual, that sticks out to us. So I think, again, if you're living in this world of customized services and B2B customized services, where it's not really a numbers game, that's how we should be thinking about automations, or at least one of the prompts should be to the salesperson to reach out.
Yes, and I agree with that a lot. That leads me to the next question, which is about the probability of a lot of, okay, let me give you a number. In the world of technology, the success ratio is probably below 3% for tech entrepreneurs. And it's not the fact that their products are not good, it's the fact that they are not great salespeople. And if you don't have any sales skills or marketing skills, it's really hard to survive. And obviously, from my point of view, marketing is my thing. And with sales, it's something that I had to learn. I wasn't good at it, but I realized it was extremely important to be a great salesperson. So you have obviously been a person you probably love selling. And I'll give you a story. I don't know if you remember, but when I met you as well, and you were running a workshop in Miami, and said, "Oh, I would have loved to come to the workshop in Miami, but I'm giving a talk in, I think it was in Vancouver." He said, "Well, don't worry, I have another workshop," and it was in another location. But you dealt with the objections so smoothly. I was like, "Oh, this man, if I could hire him, I would hire him, but obviously too expensive for me." But I love that. I think a lot of people, first of all, don't understand the art of selling, but also understand that the art of selling is the art of helping. So I would love you to kind of explain why people are doing wrong when it comes to selling.
Oh, it really, there's so many ways you can get this wrong, selling wrong. Especially in customized services, because in customized services, the sales cycle, it tends to be longer. You have to be an active listener. In my world, I see firms like yours, Flavilla. So I would see like marketing firms, especially the more they are in the tech world, they make the mistake of starting to pursue scale. They start to productize their services and pursue scale. So they get kind of caught in this mushy middle between customized services and productized services. And what happens is the cultures of these two businesses are entirely different. In a customized services firm, a salesperson has to be a really good listener. Your job when you show up in a value conversation in particular, where you're trying to determine the value to be created and therefore set price, you have to be a really good active listener. And you have to let go of most of your knowledge, of your subject matter expertise, and just focus on the client and try not to presume anything. At the other end of the spectrum, when you're selling productized services, you have a limited number of things that you can sell. Like my business, Win Without Pitching, used to be a consulting company, but it's now a training company. So we have defined products. So if I'm in a sales conversation with somebody, as hard as I know what I'm supposed to do, I'm supposed to let go of any ideas of what I should be selling this person and just focus on their challenge. But as soon as they start describing their challenge to me, I'm immediately in my mind matching the existing products. I'm saying, well, does it make sense for them to attend a workshop or a boot camp or private training on this curriculum, etc.? I have a limited number of products that I can sell. So I'm moving the conversation because we're a scaled up company. We need to sell a lot of these products. We need to move quickly. The sales conversations are shorter. Let's say I'm an independent marketing firm, I'm at the other end of the spectrum, and I should be listening intently to the client, and I should be shaping what the client is buying, the actual service offering. I should be creating a bespoke product, in this case service, for a client to help them solve very specific needs or create very specific types of value. And so what I do for this client is going to be different in some ways than what I've done for any other client. How I deliver it's going to be different, and the price that I put on it is going to be in line with the value that I'm propose to create for the client. So I am completely focused on the client, and that's the way I should be as a seller of customized services. But at the other end, productized services, I'm moving quickly. There's only 4 or 5 things I can sell you. The conversation is a lot more transactional. So I think your question is, what can we do to be better salespeople? Or it's a variation of that question. On the customized, on both ends of the spectrum, you want to be a good listener. And being a good listener is part of being a good conversationalist. And here's my biggest observation about sales gone wrong these days. We as human beings, we become pretty good communicators and conversationalists at a pretty young age. I mean, by the time you're a young adult, you're probably really good at communicating what it is you're feeling, thinking, what it is that you want, and getting back from the other person that you're talking to what it is that they're feeling, thinking, and what it is that they want. And we get pretty good at having these direct conversations and finding a place that works for both of us. As soon as we are put into a sales context where money is at stake, we seem to lose the ability to have a good conversation. And if I could wave my magic wand for all the salespeople out there and just have them kind of improve them all with one fell swoop, it would be just to remove whatever nonsense you've been taught about how a conversation in the sale needs to somehow be different from a conversation with your kids or your coworkers or your neighbor. We start to feel all of this pressure. We feel this pressure to be brilliant, to say exactly the right thing. I'm a big fan of just be human in the sale. I love the mea culpa moment. I love the moment when the salesperson says something silly, stupid, says the wrong thing, and then backs up and says, and I do this a lot, hey, can we have that last conversation over again? I need you to help me pull my foot out of my mouth. I said, whatever it is, because we've all had these moments when we're, as salespeople, when we're trying to think of like exactly the right thing to say in that moment. And then we say something and realize, oh, that was exactly the wrong thing to say. And then we gloss over it. We are under this impression that it's incumbent on us to be the person with all the answers. And we are far better off being a human being in a conversation with some to and fro, with some back and forth, and show some vulnerability by saying, hey, that last email I sent you, I just read it again and I'd like to have that one back. Can you and I hop on the phone for a quick conversation?
I'm going to try that. Can I have an email back? Like, well, I already read it. It's too late. I think this element, I was listening to what you said, it's really hard for people to unlearn. And it takes a lot of courage to say, you know what, I'm going to remove everything I know, what I've been told and so forth, and unlearn and start over again and think about it. I'm talking to a human, to another human, and we can get this. I'm trying to help you. If instead of selling, I'm trying to help you. But also there's this element of, from a salesperson, when they've been told this is a product that we have, the fear of either undervaluing or maybe the fear of, I don't know how much value this represents because I'm not the creative person or I'm not the one doing the delivery, makes them safer behind. I know exactly how much this costs, and that's it. So what do you respond to anybody listening to this? Say, well, I can't because I have no idea how much to price one person to another. If I'm working with Nike or I'm working with a shop around the corner, how am I supposed to charge them effectively based on the value, or I don't know. So what would you say to someone who may have that fear?
Well, depending on what you're selling, if you have the ability to set price and it's a customized service, then yeah, the price is going to be different from the corner shop to Nike, even if it's the same thing. And I talk in my most recent book, Pricing Creativity, I talk about the prices that Nike paid for their logo and PepsiCo paid for the Pepsi logo. So Nike in 1971 paid a design student $35 to design the Nike swoosh. So that's about $200 in today's money. And in 2008, PepsiCo paid a designer $1 million to redesign or update the Pepsi logo. So I do a lot of talks with graphic designers, and we talk about, well, what's the one price is 5,000 times the other price. How do we arrive at these prices? That's not easy math to do. The Pepsi logo is priced based on the value to the client, but I think that price could have been 20 times higher. And I think PepsiCo probably could have got a pretty good logo designed for free. So it's a really interesting range from free, or call it $10,000 to $20 million. It's really hard to set price in a situation like that. And the short answer is ask the client. Now, don't just ask the client, what do you want to pay? It's not that short because the price will be low. But I mentioned earlier this idea of a value conversation. If you want to begin to price your offerings based on the value that they help to create in the buyer's world, as opposed to the cost of your inputs like time and materials, or the market value, in air quotes, of those services, like what your competitors are charging for that, then you have to be a really good listener. You have to know how to conduct a value conversation where the focus is really on the client. What is it that you want to be true in the future, Madam Client? What are the KPIs of success? What are the metrics, the things that will measure to prove that you've achieved what you want? What's the value of getting what you want? If we could help you create this value, what would you be willing to pay for that? Would you pay us this much? How about this much? Just so that's the rough framework of a value conversation, where the whole focus is on the client. And so if you think of those 4 steps, what do you want? What will we measure? What's the value of this? What would you pay for it? You arrive at some sort of rough pricing guidance before you even talk about solutions. So this is value-based pricing in any customized product or service. That's how it works. You focus on the client and you arrive at price before you discuss or think deeply about solutions. And then once you have price, then you can determine cost. You take your profit off the table and you can say, well, here are our costs. Now, what kind of solution can we build at this cost? So that, if the listener is tracking with what I've said, that represents a fundamental shift in how most organizations price. Most salespeople of even customized services would ask the client what they want, what they're looking for. And as soon as the client starts talking, the salesperson's subject matter expertise would kick in, and they would say, I've seen this before. I know the patterns. I know what your problem is. I know what solution of ours you need to buy. I know what we need to charge for that, because then our costs it's cost plus. And they go into convince mode to try to convince the client to buy this product at this price. And that's not the way it should work. It should be, you should help the client get to a price range first, and then from price, you work backwards to arrive at solutions.
Yes, trust me. And for all my listeners, I have applied this technique and it's really, really good. And quite often agencies, we're really good at undervaluing what we think our services are worth. And the reason why I wanted to have you on the podcast, Blair, because I think this can actually be applied a lot for tech companies selling, as I say, customized bespoke services. Obviously, one of our products, and it can't change, then that's a different game. But if you are selling the same way creatives are selling, I really recommend to read these 2 books, The Win Without Pitching, Manifesto, and also Pricing Creativity, A Guide to Profit Beyond the Billable Hour. We'll be back in a couple of seconds.